Welcome to It Is Written Canada. Thank you for joining us. Money and finances are usually not taught in schools, and parents seldom teach their children these subjects at home either.
Our special guest, Sven Tornlov, believes that we must not only recognize this need, but also teach our children that their daily decisions about money will affect the rest of their lives.
When it comes to finances, Sven Tornlov is a financial expert we trust. Sven is the Associate Treasurer and Plan Giving Director of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the British Columbia and Yukon Conference. He has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Walla Walla University, and he is a family man who is passionate about teaching his children about finances.
Sven, thank you for joining us on It Is Written Canada.
Well, thank you, Renee and Michael, for the opportunity to be here. It is my pleasure.
So Sven, let me begin with the foundation, because we're talking about children and teaching them about finances. What's your view as a Christian how do you understand finances?
How I understand finances and how I feel that they work within my Christian value system is I believe life is too long and the work is too great not to have a solid grasp, of personal finances. I feel that we need to have an aim, and a motto which is going to direct us to God, and that we are here specifically, to grow God's kingdom, to finish the work. And if that isn't our foundation, then if we look through finances, it's going to be like looking through a kaleidoscope. Everything is going to be jumbled, and we're going to start putting our faith and our goals in the wrong places. So if we set our foundation on God, and that is our goal, to grow His kingdom, I think that aligns everything when it comes to what our goals and how we set them for our personal finances.
Interesting how you started off that life is too long. Usually people say life is too short.
That's right.
So why do you see as life is too long?
Well, we have 80 years, and if we start making mistakes in our late teens and early 20s, we will live with those mistakes, for our whole life. And I'm reminded of a Bible verse, if I could borrow that Bible.
Yeah.
In Mark 8, verses 36. For what will it profit a man if we gain the whole world and lose our own soul? So I think that really sets the foundation and trajectory of where our life needs to go when it comes to our finances.
So life is too long in the sense that God really has an eternal perspective.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sven, do you think it's important for parents to teach their children how to deal with financial matters?
If they're not being taught in school, which I wasn't taught in school on financial matters, we as parents need to see that as not a burden, but a privilege that we have to be able to teach our children. And it's fun to spend time with our children. Yes, a little bit of work, but you get into the groove, and it is enjoyable to teach and train our children.
I believe it's very important for parents to teach their children about money because it sets them up for either success or failure later on in life. When kids are being taught the importance and the value of money, they'll realize that they have to save it wisely, that they need to realize how to spend wisely as well, and how to give generously. And that's one of the biggest things that I'm very passionate about, is seeing kids, even young kids that are generous. You can see at a young age, they are learning how to share. It may not be money, it could be their toys, but later on, those healthy habits that they're building will then come into play in their adult years. And you in turn become just a happier person. You're full of so much joy when you're able to give to others. Instead of keeping your fists tight, your wallets closed, God calls us to live for others, not for ourselves. And a huge way to actually play that out is with our funds. And it's so much more of a blessing when you can see other people thriving and other needs and other charities succeeding with your money, right? And just being able to use what God has given you for a greater purpose.
And I can remember very, very vividly, I was 6 or 7 years old, and my mom said, it's time for you to have your own bank account. And I can remember, opening up the bottom of the jar, taking all my coins out, having them in an envelope, and my sister and I going to the bank. I didn't realize until later that my mom had gone a week earlier, signed all the paperwork, for a joint bank account for your child to start it, And so we went to the bank. It was a Friday afternoon, and we went to the bank and stood in line. And I can remember standing in line talking to my mother as she was standing behind me, and then she never answered me. I turned around to find in horror that my mom was not standing behind me. She was sitting over in the waiting area, 10 feet away. And here I am standing in a lineup with other people, and I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? And she's like, why? I already have a bank account. I don't need to stand in line. You're the one that needs to open an account. At 6 or 7 years old, here I am standing in line by myself. I've stood in line many times with my mom at the bank, but not by myself. Fear gripped me. And I can remember getting to the front of the line, and I still remember the teller. Her name was Kathy, and she said, Sven, can I help you? And I walked forward, took my little envelope, stuck it, up on top of the counter because it was about nose height. And she helped me count out my coins, and we started my first bank account where I had she asked me if I could print my name, and I said yes, and I printed out my name because it was my bank account. So now I had ownership of it. It wasn't my mom's bank account that I had money in. It was my bank account. And I think that set the foundation and the ball rolling for me to take ownership of my account.
That's pretty good.
That's wonderful. That's super. I like that. I love that. So what about that example? Did you do that with your children?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did. And I can remember, my girls, it was hilarious. A quick sidebar is I have 2 girls, and they are 3.5 years apart. And so when the youngest one was 7, when they started going to school at 6, that's when we did it. The same, I just modeled what my mother modeled with me. And so we would go to the bank, and we would all be in line. My youngest would be first, and then my oldest, and then I would be. And always, the teller would always look at me. We would have eye contact, and she'd be like, may I help you? Thinking that we were all going to come forward. And my youngest, she would just, at 7 years old, she would just walk by herself. And the teller would look at me and be confused for about half a second and then smile. And my youngest, because she talks kind of loud, and she would walk up to the teller, and the teller says, how can I help you? And she'd hand him a little envelope of some money she had to deposit. And the teller would be like, do you have a bank card? Of course. Do you know your PIN? Of course. She loved putting in her PIN number, And the tellers were always amazed. And then they would call to help me again, And of course, my oldest one would go up, and then I would be there to do my own banking. And so we would all sometimes be at 3 different tellers doing our own banking.
We would do things together as a family to build memories, but not to buy things, right? We would go on hikes together, we would explore nature, go biking, spend time as a family, game nights, anything that didn't cost a lot. And even when it came to buying clothes, like when we were little, we would even thrift for our clothes. And I find that before it was seen as something that lower income families do, but now thrifting is like the trendiest thing that all young people are on. So, do what's best for your family in the season that you're in, and know that you can still live a positive life and a happy and healthy life, even without having to spend a lot of money.
You have this independence going on from a very early age. I'm sure it created a lot of confidence. What is the most important lesson do you think that you or a parent should teach their child about financial matters?
To teach a child about financial matters, I believe that a child learns at a very young age just by modeling, seeing what you are doing. And they are like sponges. They absorb so much that we don't realize that they are absorbing. And so I think that we as parents have to role model good financial values and management. If we tell our child that they can't have brown sugar on their oatmeal, but we put brown sugar on our oatmeal in front of them, it isn't going to work out. You know, when they're in their late teens, middle teens, they'll have oatmeal on top of their brown sugar. You know, it's going to be much more difficult for them if we can't manage our credit cards, we can't manage our finances. They're going to have a significantly harder time. So if we role model good financial responsibility, that will help our children a lot. And then, you know, we can start out by talking about a value system. What are things, you know, that we value, you know, with our finances? Do we see heaven and growing God's kingdom as our ultimate goal, as our foundation, you know, for our finances? Do we view volunteering, donating, being philanthropic? Is that something that we want our children to emulate, to embrace? And so those are value systems that we then can start to instill in our children and have the conversations. You know, when you're in the car, resist the temptation, you know, to turn on the radio, you know, a prime opportunity to start having these conversations about our finances. And I think the last item, which is good for all of us to practice, is delayed gratification. You know, in today's day and age, if we want something, you just go and get it. You know, we all have plastic, so you don't have to have the cash on hand. You just go down to the store, flash plastic, it comes to you. And you know what? If you're too tired or too lazy or don't even want to go to the store, you can get it delivered tomorrow. So we live in a reality of it's at your door. You know, you snap your fingers and there it is. So delayed gratification, you know, I think back to, not that I was there, but when my grandparents would go to the store, you know, or if you watch a movie of old times, you know, it's a big deal to go to town. And they have made that list throughout the month of things that they need, you know, things that they need. And they go to town, it's a big deal. But for us, we can buy so much on a whim. So delayed gratification, I think, is so vital for us to teach them and probably very good to reinforce in our own lives.
Sven, what about teaching our children how to create and stick to a budget? And at what age do you think it's ideal to start doing that?
I don't think that it is ever too young to start children learning about finances and how to create a budget system. As an example for myself, when my oldest daughter, when she was 2 and 3 years old, I decided I wanted to create, you know, an ability for us to start having conversations about money. Well, how do you do that with a 2 and 3 year old? So I can remember coming home from work, and everyone loves gifts and surprises. You know, well, I do. I know for me, my saddest day of the year is always Boxing Day because it's a full year until Christmas again, you know? I love presents. And so I would come home from work and I would walk in the door and my 2 and 3 year old would come toddling over, thrilled to see me coming in the door. And this time, instead of picking her up and swinging her around and being so excited to see her, I just held out my hands like this. And I said, I have a gift for you. I have a surprise for you. Pick a hand. And so she would pick one of the two hands, but I had a penny in both hands. So it didn't matter what hand she picked, she would have her gift of a penny. And so she would pick this hand and I would turn it over, open it up, and it was a penny. And I would tell her, so we learned a word. This is a penny and it is for you. Now every child at a very young age, I mean, they see parents, you know, with money, it's sitting on the table, it's sitting on the counter, and right away, what do they hear? Don't touch. Right? So they know it is something special. It has this allure to it. And so there's this curiosity that they have for it. So all of a sudden now I am giving her her own penny. I mean, she cherished it at 2 and 3 years old. We set up a little piggy bank for her. And so she learned the word penny. The next day, to reinforce, I came home from work. And again, I had a gift for her, put my hands out, and I said, which hand? I mean, the glee in her eyes, another gift. And so she would pick a hand and I would turn it over, open it up, Again, Tuesday evening, it's a penny. And so reinforced for the week, every day for the week, she had a penny. So she had 5 pennies at the end of the week. Come Monday the next week, again, a gift. So now she was expecting a gift from Dad. And she was excited for it. She was looking forward to it. She knew she had a gift coming. And Monday, the second week, she chose a hand, and it was a nickel. So now she knew the pennies. Now she knew nickels. And we did it the 3rd week with dimes. We did it the 4th week with quarters. Then I stopped because it got too expensive. But you know, after a month, we could then sort coins. Very easy. She would pull all the pennies aside, all the nickels, all the dimes, all the quarters. And now we could start having the talk of relationship between pennies to nickels. I'll give you 5 of these for 1 of these. They equal the same. So at a young age, you start learning the relationship of how money works. And then for my girls, as we talked about, when they turned 6 years old, went to school, they had to start their own bank account. So they had to go to the bank by themselves. You know, we talked about it, how they were going to do it, but they started their own bank accounts. So let's create that real world example with my children. So I don't want to give them any responsibility for any expenses. So yeah, so they're required, you know, then out of their money to pay for their hot lunch and so forth. So as you go along, there are certain requirements. You know, when they're 2 and 3, they can start learning the coins. When they start grade 1, they start learning how to keep a ledger and a rudimentary budget. And, you know, especially in the wintertime, you know, Saturday night, pull out some board games. I can remember as a child playing Monopoly, you know, and I hated it. And that's a good word to use, hated it, if I landed on luxury tax. You know how hard it is as a 6-year-old to count $75 out? You know, it's very challenging, you know, and it was for me. But it helped me in math in school. And we would just play until our attention span, my sisters and I's, was done. You know, maybe that was an hour. And then we would take that game and put it up on the piano, and then we would continue that game until someone won or lost. I, being the youngest, inevitably lost. And then, once there was a winner, then we would start the game over again. And I can remember the day that I won Monopoly for the very first time, and that's the last time we played. But you know, there's so many games. There's Monopoly, and if Monopoly gets boring, you can go to Paul Economy. Paul Economy is a fantastic game with inflation built into it. You buy advertising and corporations. It's a Canadian game, and you can play Stock Ticker. You know, so these kind of games just give the mind a little bit to understand of how things start working. And you know, it's great family time.
Sven, I want to ask you how we would teach our children to distinguish between wants and needs. But before I go there, I want to follow up back to what you said about giving your girls, you mentioned an allowance, and then, you know, the date, and then if they get a hot lunch, then they would obviously come off their allowance, right? So if they didn't have that money, because it sounded like you made them responsible. If they wanted a hot lunch, they had to pay for the hot lunch out of their allowance. So let's say if they didn't have that money in their bank account, they wouldn't be able to get a hot lunch. What about some people? How do you feel about getting an allowance for doing chores? Because a chore, to me, is a need or a privilege that our children need to do. I grew up in South Africa, and we were spoiled there. So when we came to Canada, we had to do chores together as a family because I couldn't afford to pay someone to do the chores like we did back in South Africa. And so for me, teaching our kids how to do chores was a privilege, but should they be getting an allowance for doing those chores? So how do we distinguish between those needs and those wants?
So that's a very good question, and I think a lot of people pose that question as to whether we base a child's allowance or their remuneration on doing chores, you know, around the home. You know, we all live under one roof, and so corporately, I think we're responsible for certain things, just about being a good citizen in your own home. But a budget is creating your value system within finances. And if you don't have dollars, there isn't any decision-making process that needs to be made. And you're just window shopping. You know, you're not being able to buy anything, to problem solve, needs versus wants. You're not building that understanding and the relationship of those two words if you don't have money. So my income, 100% of it isn't disposable. So I have to create that same real world example for my children. I can't just blindly give them an allowance every month and they have 100% of that money that they can just spend on whatever they want. Because I don't have that. You know, I can't. So we have to now set out an expectation that if they're receiving a certain amount of money, a portion of that, and it should be a major portion of it, has to go to certain expenses. So my girls, they get an allowance. They don't get very much per month. They get $15 a month. And of that $15, they have an opportunity to buy 2 hot lunches in that month, which there are only 2 hot lunches, and each one's $5. So if they want the hot lunches, 10 of that $15 is gone. And so they only have $5, which is disposable. So they take those $10, and if they don't like that hot lunch or don't want that hot lunch or they want to spend their money somewhere else, then they just have to make their lunch in the morning instead of buying the hot lunch. So I get paid every 2 weeks, you know, on the 15th and the 30th of every month. And so my child, they get their allowance on a regular basis too, on the first business day of every month. That's when they get their allowance. So we're creating real world scenarios for them then to be in this decision-making process. They don't get their allowance, oh, Mom or Dad, I need $5 for my hot lunch. No, you get your allowance on the first of the month. You now can budget it and set up what you feel is your priority for the month and then stick to it, you know, throughout the month.
You know, really evaluate why you're getting what you're getting. In today's day and age especially, there's just so much out there that young people can spend on. The amount of consumerism that's out there in the world, especially with social media, we're constantly seeing a new gadget come out, the new iPhone that comes out, the new AirPods that are coming out, the new makeup that a celebrity has endorsed, right? It's just like our minds are being bombarded with all these things that we could buy. And somehow, they're able to make us believe that these are things that we need, things that we can't live without. But what's that thing that we can't live without? It's God, right? So all these other things are just secondary. So really teach your child that the things that this world has to offer are nowhere near the amount of value of what God has to offer. So I find that when you teach your child the importance of service and dedicating your life to God, the things that you want to spend on become very dim. And you won't feel the need to have to buy all these things that the world offers.
Sven, we've come near to the end of our time together. I wonder if you have any final thoughts for our viewers, maybe some cautions, some challenges, some insights you'd like to share.
I think when we think about raising our children in financial matters, that I hope that you will find today's program as an encouragement, you know, and we should be looking forward to and count it as a blessing to have the ability, you know, to teach our children and to learn along with them. You know, what a joy that is that we can do this together with our children. And I would like to close, you know, with a final thought, you know, from the Bible, if I may. And it's found in Proverbs 22, verse 6, which reads, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And I think it's all of our goals, you know, when our children finish school, that they are then have the ability to be financially responsible and to stand on their own 2 feet, and then to carry on your legacy and mission. And if that is, you know, to grow God's kingdom, that they will then be generous to others and see that through.
That's excellent. Thank you, Sven. I wonder if you can pray for our viewers. I know that there are young people who watch our program and of all ages, and so I wonder if you can pray for our viewers that maybe they've been inspired by this. Maybe there's parents, grandparents, or teachers that they're looking for wisdom from God of how to teach their children and those who they're responsible for about financial matters. I wonder if you could pray for them right now.
Yes. You know, dear Lord, it is such a privilege that you have given us children that we can then train in finances. And Lord, I just want to pray, for those parents out there, those grandparents out there, those teachers out there that have this big responsibility and this joy. So Father, please bless them, give them the encouragement, and give them the joy of going through this process together to teach their child not only about financial matters, but to serve and to love you more, Lord, is our prayer. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Sven, thank you so much for joining us on It Is Written Canada today.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Friends, our free offer is a little teaching booklet for children entitled Goats for God.
Goats for God teaches children simple lessons about giving, principally calling us to be cheerful givers and reminding us that God blesses us when we give.
Before you go, we would like to thank all of you who have supported the ministry of It Is Written Canada with your prayers and financial contributions. Without your support, this television ministry could not have reached so many people for so many decades.
Yes, thank you. And we would like to invite you to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also listen to our podcasts. And if you go to our website, you can see our latest programs.
Friends, if you want the kind of wisdom that God longs to give you, even in the financial areas of your life, we recommend you open the Bible, where it is recorded that Jesus found his assurance to defeat the devil through the word of his Father when he declared, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God."